Let it grow. If you've been with us throughout this month of May, you know that we are using the theme of letting go. And we began with let it be. We moved on to let it go. And now we're at let it grow. My wife says we should have one more and say let it glow, but we'll put a little of that glow in with the grow here. Anybody a gardener? Who does some gardening? I'm looking for hands here, and you can put your virtual hand up if you're able to do so. And I see that there are gardeners. 4.5 years ago, I moved to Payson. So I'm a relative newcomer around here compared with many of those who are in this room here. And some of you may never have been to Payson if you're with us virtually. So when I moved, I saw that there was a lot of gardening going on here in Arizona. I kind of didn't know about it because I haven't lived here before, but it's in my heritage. I grew up with a father who thought if he didn't have a half an acre for a garden, it wasn't worth doing. And so we always had bountiful gardens. And I grew up hoeing corn and weeding and learning bit by bit how to grow vegetables. It became a staple for us, and we would freeze, or my mother would freeze and can, and we had fruit all the way through the year. We had the harvest with us always because we had a lot from that garden. Well, when I did come to Payson, the first year when the season came around, I tried to plant a few things in the backyard. Watch out for the bunnies and the javelina. They're going to take care of everything unless it's really protected. And so I didn't have much luck that first year. The second year, I discovered, thanks to many here at Unity of Payson, the community garden here at Payson. We have a beautiful community garden. And so I got a plot in the community garden. Well, it has a big fence all around, so it's protected, and a lot of help along the way. When I did that, I got my plot. I began to plan. And I first of all went to Home Depot and got a nice gray Sterlite tub, because I knew I was going to have a lot of things for gardening. I was putting tools in there. I knew I was going to need some soaker hoses, and I got that. Little tags to mark what things were. And of course, long before I got that tub, I had been in the winter looking through seed catalogs so that I could get the seeds that I wanted. And then I sat down with graph paper. I really did this. I sat down with graph paper and I laid out my bed that I was going to plant. It was a wonderful, exciting time. And I had a measure of success that first year. I say a measure of maybe 30% success or 40, because I was still learning. But the idea of being able to till the soil, be able to watch things grow, gripped me. And it stays with me to this day. 2 additional seasons I had, and I got better as I went along because I learned. Now I'm really getting better because I've thrown my lot in with Ram, and Ram has a beautiful organic farm about 12 miles south of here in Geisela. And he knows a lot too that I don't know. And so I have an opportunity to learn. But that growing process is important to me. And I'll refer to a few things in that growing process as we go through this message today. Let it grow, it is, and if I would have you remember anything today, I would say this: let it grow, plant, protect, and prune to have what you intend. Plant, protect, and prune. Not talking about the nurturing part of growing, we're talking about letting that plant do what that plant wants to do. letting that seed become all that it has the potential to be. So let's start with the planting process. Of course, there's choosing the seed. When I looked through those seed catalogs for the first time, I wanted to choose exactly the seeds that I wanted, ones that I remembered from my youth and ones that just looked really good in the seed catalog. I thought it was going to be wonderful. So I began by choosing the seed. Well, right immediately, I'm going to make the parallel to our spiritual journey and choosing the seed for our spiritual journey. In doing that, I want to talk about consciousness. We use that term a lot. We talked about an uplifted consciousness or raising our consciousness. But consciousness is a little difficult to get your head around that term. And Charles Fillmore, co-founder of Unity, defined consciousness as a number of things. And he said it's the ideas, the thoughts, the emotions, the sensation, and the knowledge that comprise everything. So it's a big bowl full of words and ways of approaching truth. Ideas, of course, that relates to not only our human ideas, but the divine ideas from which all of our human ideas have their source. Our thoughts, we talk about thoughts creating things, thoughts being what comes first. In consciousness, we do the work with thought, and then eventually we have the manifestation or the realization of that which we desire. And then there's emotions. Emotions that really make it come alive. If we have our thought coupled with emotion, then we're much, much closer to the realization of what we want. Interesting thing, and we'll get back to this, emotions are something you have a choice about as well. You got to think, well, no, I'm just overtaken by emotions, but hang in there. We're going to talk about that a little bit as we go along. And then, of course, there's sensations. Do we listen to our body? Do we listen to that sense of what's up for us? That from the gut, even sense of things, that sensation, important part of it. And then also even that which we have known, that which we have learned, that which we have read, that which we came to know over maybe decades and decades in our life. So this is what consciousness is. And so we take one part of that, the thoughts and emotions, and we use that and equate that with the seed. And it's that seed that we place in the overall consciousness that will eventually become a plant and bear fruit. So it's thought and emotion that is that Cody? So we have a furry attendee.
He agrees.
That was an agreement? Thank you, Cody. Thought and emotion. We know we get to choose our thoughts. That's not an easy thing, however, because those thoughts go back and forth in our mind, a million of them, and we have also 500,000 ideas that spur those thoughts, and we can't seem to keep on track for what's the most important sometimes. We can't stay with it. Well, we get to choose those thoughts. Oh, is this a little bit of discipline? Yes, it is. Learning to choose our thoughts. So important to having what we desire to have. And then empowering that thought with emotion. There's a thing in dream reading, not dream reading, dream literature called lucid dreaming. I don't know if anybody knows about lucid dreaming. And I kind of equate this with emotions. Lucid dreaming is where you're having a dream, you kind of wake up and you say, I don't want the dream to go that way, and you give direction to that dream, and you go back to the dream state, and in fact, you change the course of that dream. I'd like to suggest that emotion is the same. When an emotion comes out, let's not just say, oh, that's what I have to accept. But let's take that emotion and see if we can tailor it a little bit so that it helps that thought that we have that we want to bring into realization to be empowered in the direction we want it to be empowered. So I challenge you to give a little tryout to this. When you have an emotion that you don't particularly like, see if you can just shift that a little bit. See if you can consciously choose an emotion that's going to help you realize that which you are thinking about. So we chose the seed, and we do that in our spiritual journey. We choose the thought and emotion. Then we often go and take the soil and work with it. We amend the soil, assuming, well, here in Arizona, the soil isn't necessarily always very rich, and so amending the soil is important if we would have a good growth. So we take that soil and we amend it. We put compost on it. We treat it in a number of ways to make sure that it's a fertile medium for growing what we want to grow. The same thing is true for us in our spiritual journey. What's the medium that we want to do? What do we want to do with our consciousness? Remember, the seed is the thought and emotion planted in consciousness. What do we want to do? How can we amend our consciousness so that we grow prolifically like we really want to do? And that the plant that is our spiritual journey will be well nourished all along the way. So amending the soil, choosing and amending the soil. And then the other thing that never works and didn't work for me in any of my gardening experiences, if I didn't take the seed out of the packet, nothing grew.
Amen.
I suggest that sometimes we don't even take the seed out of the packet. And so on our spiritual journey, that thought, let's get it out and into our world and into our experience. Take the seed out of the packet. So there's a bit of Buddhist logic that I like in this regard. It kind of goes like this. If you plant a lemon seed and you pray for mango fruit, it won't work. If you plant seeds of kindness, you can expect to reap kindness as well. Or put in whatever you want to put in. Plant seeds of peace, plant seeds of love, any of those 12 powers. If you plant those seeds, but if you don't choose the seed, and if you don't, as we talked about, amend the soil, make it rich, get that seed out of the packet, put it in the soil, you won't get the result that you look for. So choose your seed, plant it, nurture it a little bit, and allow it to grow. Let it grow. So back to our idea to start with, let it grow. Plant what you intend to harvest. Plant what you intend to harvest. So let's go on to one of the other things that help in our allowing of these seeds that are the instigator and the reason for our spiritual journey. Let's go and talk about them and how we have to protect them. We move to the protection area. Talked about the bunnies and the javelina. Well, one protection in the garden, of course, is a fence. If you go down to Shanti Olmsted, you're going to see rolls of fencing planned and ready to be put around so that as the harvest comes, you get to harvest it instead of somebody else who wants to harvest ahead of you, like a squirrel or a rabbit or a javelina. I don't know if you have javelinas down there, Ron, but I know you got other people that are ready to harvest, or other animals that are ready to harvest. So protect that thing. So how do you protect it? Well, in the garden, we may protect it from the heat of the sun, the cold of the frost. We might protect it from getting trampled on. It wouldn't happen in the community garden, but could happen. You could misstep and trample a plant when they had great expectations and hopes for it. We protect it from that trampling. We protect it by removing pests. You're probably familiar, if you're a gardener, with aphids or squash bugs or any of the like critters that keep our harvest to a minimum because the plant withers and perhaps even dies. So we protect them by taking soapy water and spraying it on the leaves of our plant to take care of the aphids, or even meticulously going to our squash plants, looking under the leaf and picking off those squash bugs that are there. The same is true for us in our spiritual journey. And what are the pests? I'd like to suggest 3. How about worry? Worry is a misuse of our imagination, of course. And if we spend our time with worry, it's like a pest that keeps the plant from growing, that keeps the spiritual journey from flourishing. How about complaining? How about complaining? This, that, the other thing. How often do we find ourselves in a rut with complaint after complaint after complaint until we finally realize, wait, this isn't doing what I want it to get done. That complaint is a pest. And then there's distraction. So easy to get distracted. I suggest that each of you, if you're like me, now you may not be, you may be further along than I am, have 1 or 2 or maybe a half a dozen distractions that keep you from being who you really are and doing what you are to do. They are pests. Get rid of the pests. That spiritual journey will flourish. So protect that new growth. And then we move on to pruning. The plant gets going. I just learned something from Ram. I thought there's a magical way of pruning something so it'll be just right, cutting in exactly the right place. And then if you're a master like Ram is, or some of the rest of you, you'll prune it exactly right and the plant will flourish and bear a lot of fruit. Well, Ram made it very simple. He said, if there's growth that's going to take away from the kind of growth you really want, get rid of it. So there's these lower branches on a tomato plant that aren't ever going to produce any fruit. They're taking some of the nutrients. Get rid of them. There's the suckers that keep you from having the fruit that you want to in the amount that you wanted, that if you don't take them off, you will diminish what you get. So prune. Same thing is true for the spiritual journey. But just an aside on this, we so often think, God, some God out there is going to prune us. I suggest that the divine within, which is you, is the one who prunes. So take responsibility for that. And take those unwanted things, the things that don't promote your growth, and eliminate them. We use the power of release as one of our 12 powers in unity. Originally, that power was called elimination. I think it just didn't take very well over the years, and so we changed it to release. But it is true that there are things to eliminate. We do this in our spiritual practice by denial. We talk about affirmations always, but before that affirmation, sometimes we need to engage in denial. That bit of saying, this has no power over me. What is it that you would eliminate to let your spiritual journey flourish? And then if you would prune kind of alongside, sometimes what you have to do is to wait. If you've grown any kind of plant, you do know that an excess of attention sometimes is as bad as not enough. You water it too frequently, you just, oops, I was trying to help that plant and I broke off a branch. And we give that so much attention, we focus on that, and maybe what couldn't happen or what might not happen, we don't allow the plant to grow. Same thing in our spiritual journey. Sometimes we have an excess of attention put on something that we don't want, and we don't grow. Because our focus is on what we don't want. So let it grow. Sometimes just wait and let it grow. Sometimes it's a matter of time. We say, oh, this is what I want. Now, please, yesterday. Doesn't work that way. Sometimes there is an appropriate time for everything. And so we draw back, not wanting to attach ourselves too closely to exactly the result we want, but allow for that to grow in good timing. Sometimes when you're in the garden, you have a germination time. And it says 55 days till harvest, and it germinates first. Sometimes it takes forever for that little seed to produce a plant. You just think, wow, man, it's not there. Maybe I should dig them all up and start all over again. And it's 2 days away from popping through the earth and being ready to its journey to growth and full maturity. So it takes time. And sometimes that 55 days stretches to 75 days. And if we jump off the ship before the timing that is right is allowed, we miss the whole benefit. So timing, just wait. We often talk about waiting in the silence, just allowing ourselves not to be so attached to time, but just to be there in the now, in the eternal now. So important, if you would let your journey grow. And then finally, there's an art to wondering. There's a beauty and a truth in mystery. James Christian was a philosopher who wrote a book, I think in the 1970s sometimes, called Philosophy, an Introduction to the Art of Wondering. Can you be comfortable with wondering? Do you have to know now exactly what's going to happen? Do you have to, or can you just sit there and wonder? Can you imagine? That's part of wondering. Can you just allow the thing that you want to take the time that it needs to mature and burst into your life in full form? So we, over the last 3 weeks, have used what we call a polarity map. And Rick, if you would put up that one slide about polarity map. So we're going to have revise the polarity map again. And let's see if we can find it. Go a little ahead. There we go. Thanks, Rick. So you notice this polarity map. If you haven't seen it before, it's that infinity symbol on its side. At the top is a positive approach to things. At the bottom is a negative. Up here is all sorts of good stuff. Down here is often fear, sometimes anger on the bottom. And on the very left here, we see growth. And on the very right, we see stasis. Stasis is a funny word. Don't use it too often, but I couldn't find a better one. Stasis is a state of inactivity. State of inactivity. Growth is moving upward, evolving, growing, becoming larger, getting more ready to produce a harvest. But sometimes we're in that side of the polarity map that is stasis. And sometimes it's okay to be there. Certainly okay to be there during the winter when you're planting. And you just allow things to be on that level. But eventually, as you come down, if you take that circle, come down to the bottom of that, which is more negative, you get stuck. You worry, you are fearful about certain things. And if you're in that stasis where there's no ability to change, you won't get to. And if you follow that up, that to this other side of the polarity map to growth, you'll find that you're in a place where you can plant, where you can protect, where you can prune and receive what it is that you decide. Now, there may be a time when you'll go back around that and you'll need that time to be quiet again. But today we're emphasizing this growth thing on the polarity map, and know that naturally it will come if we allow it to do so. Back to the beginning in my gardening experience, I couldn't wait for one of the simplest meals my mother ever made. That was new potatoes, fresh peas, and melted butter. Oh, there's nothing quite like that. But you know, it took a lot longer than I wanted. And it had to have the time to do that. And it was part of the process of the growth of the garden, that in the right season, everything would be ready to harvest. It would be perfect. And it was. So I challenge all of us today. Well, let me take just a minute. I take seriously these messages that I assign myself to do. And I think there's one thing in my life right now that I'm challenged with, and I'm challenged to use this. In February, we did a series on forgiveness. And that series on forgiveness spurred me to do a class. And we did a class to go along with the series on forgiveness. And out of that, I just knew that I was being challenged to write and put that in book form. I got really excited about it. But you know what? I've been somewhat distracted, and I haven't made the progress that I wanted. Because while I planted that seed and I got started with it, and I have outlines and I've written some somewhere, protect my time to be able to give to that pursuit. And it certainly was loath to, although I'm learning. I have a few people that read this with me, and they say, well, this doesn't exactly work for me. I have to come in and come back and prune that project. So my challenge right now, if I would let it grow, is the plant is done. The idea is there, but I move on to the second step of protecting the time, protecting that which I feel I'm called to do. So you can pray with me about that. I'd love you to pray with me about that. Just an example, but you all have the same thing for something you know that is yours to do. But maybe you haven't planted it yet. You got the idea, but you haven't really planted it. Or maybe you've planted it, but you haven't taken the pains to protect that you're called to do. Or eventually to prune it, to back off with your ego. And this is how I've conceived it. It's got to go like this. Well, we could have said that about this morning's service. It's got to go like this. Well, it's got to be sitting there on the piano and singing. Well, you know, wasn't it really beautiful when we sang that first song, I Am the Radiant Life of God? We had Phyllis leading us vocally, and that was it. But if we didn't allow it, we'd gotten all frazzled and said, okay, no music today. It wouldn't happen. So you choose what it is in your life that is the real unique you coming to the fore. You choose that. I'm going to suggest one thing. How do we do it? Choose one thought that you have, one that's based on a divine idea. One thought that you have, you know that you are inspired by that thought. Take that one thought and ask yourself the question, how do I plant that seed, that thought in consciousness? And ask yourself the question, how do I protect that? And when necessary, how do I prune it? Let it grow. And so it is.